I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Week 5 is a war zone, okay? With how many injuries we have at the wide receiver position, combined with the buys, I am starting right now either Jerry Jeudy or Stephon Diggs. We'll talk about their rankings later on, but hopefully you're not as down bad as I am. Now, starting tier 1, we already know Puka Nacua looks like the wide receiver 1 by far this year. Doesn't matter the matchup, literally not worth talking about. He's won all weeks. Amon-Ra St. Brown could possibly give him a run for his money, though, because with St. Brown, he's actually already the wide receiver 2 with 23.6 points per game. The implied team total against the Cincinnati Bengals, according to flockfantasy.com, is close to 30 points. This is a great matchup. He's averaged 2 receiving touchdowns a game over the past 3 weeks. And yeah, honestly, you can put him in S tier probably just for this week alone. Now, going over and looking at what we have with Jackson Smith-Njigba, it's difficult to come through and rank anybody else ahead of him, given the guaranteed target volume that you get. Even in the game against the Arizona Cardinals on Thursday last week, it looked like he was going to do nothing through the majority of it, but at the very end, he saves you with just a boring 13 fantasy points, by far and away his worst performance. But outside of that, he had given you 19.5, 18.5, and 20.5 points. And this matchup against Tampa is one in which you're more likely than not going to see the Seattle Seahawks actually have to throw the ball. Now, going over and looking at the Minnesota Vikings, they are playing again in Europe against the Cleveland Browns. Justin Jefferson, obviously, was a very strong option this past week with 11 targets, 10 receptions, 126 receiving yards. What we saw last year is actually the team staying in Europe was well adjusted, and the team that had to travel over their week of kind of got boat race. So that could be a possibility here against Cleveland. Nico Collins going to play the Baltimore Ravens is actually in a very interesting spot with an implied team total of 21 points. I was expecting sportsbooks to give Houston a higher total considering how bad this Baltimore Ravens defense looks at the moment. I mean, right now, if we're looking at what you have with Nico, this is a receiver that has been disappointing this year with only 13.5 points per game. He's been the wide receiver 24 in points per game, according to flockfantasy.com. But I really do like the matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, George Pickens will be our next name. With Pickens, last week, obviously the game goes to overtime. It's an 80-point contest, so I don't necessarily know how much we can take from that. But he still drops 33.5 points. If we look over the past 3 weeks for George Pickens, he's averaged almost 25 points per game, and the target share numbers are going to be phenomenal when you have no CeeDee Lamb. And I'm not worried about this matchup against the New York Jets. If Tyreek stayed healthy this past week, I mean, he would have had a hell of a game. Now, Garrett Wilson will also be a A-tier wide receiver for probably the first time so far this season. It's just a really good spot going up against arguably the worst defense in the NFL with the Dallas Cowboys. Right now, you have an implied team total of 22.5 points for the New York Jets, which is much higher than what we're used to seeing for the Jets, just because, again, this Dallas Cowboys defense is horrendous. And Garrett Wilson almost had the monstrous performance on Monday night. If the refs didn't rob him of a touchdown, the man would have had almost 30 fantasy points. Now, let's move to the B-tier wide receivers. I completely understand people thinking that we are too high on Jamar Chase here. And honestly, it's not like I'm the biggest Jamar Chase guy this year. Y'all know I had a chance to take him in the Flock League when I could have picked the number 1 spot for my draft position. We passed on it. So it's not like I'm all in on Chase the way that I was last year. But realistically, go back to that Jacksonville game with Jake Browning under center for the majority of it. Jamar Chase still had 165 receiving yards, 16 targets, 14 receptions, and a receiving touchdown. Now, of course, the back-to-back weeks here against the Minnesota Vikings and the Denver Broncos, 2 really tough matchups. Jake Browning's looked like the worst starting quarterback in the entire NFL. But as of right now, you actually have sportsbooks giving the Cincinnati Bengals an implied team total of about 19.75 points, which is like right in line with what you have with some of these other teams. Like realistically, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they only project to have 1 more point score than Cincinnati this next week. Now, I'm still going to rank Igbukah as an absolute must-start option the same way that we did a week ago, because you have no Mike Evans in this offense for right now. Chris Godwin still is not 100%. And Igbuka has been able to expand his role every single week this season, where he's gone from 6 targets to 7 targets to 8 targets to 10 targets. So yes, he's lower in my rest of season rankings because eventually I do think that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin will be fully healthy at the same time, but that's not the case right now. Courtland Sutton just prints usable weeks in fantasy. Every year, what we have seen is one maybe really disappointing performance. Last year, it was week 7 against the New Orleans Saints. This season, it was week 2 against the Indianapolis Colts. But outside of that, you can just guarantee yourself 18 fantasy points. Like the volumes there, the receiving touchdowns, the efficiency, the big plays, almost everything that you would want to see from a wide receiver, Sutton has it. You're playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, so this is a really tough matchup this week. So obviously, I'm going to keep these rankings up to date on flogfantasy.com as the week goes by. And you can actually see the updated tier list format on flogfantasy.com. If you're a paid subscriber, just hit that new little button there that's like a little grid. It may be tough to see, but you'll figure it out. Now, Davante Adams will be our next name. With Davante Adams, he's actually the wide receiver 15 in points per game so far this season, averaging about 15.5. If we go through and look at where this comes from, it's really just with the receiving touchdowns. Like the yardage totals haven't particularly been there. He's having about 50 receiving yards a game outside of the one really strong performance against the Tennessee Titans. But he's just had receiving touchdown after receiving touchdown after receiving touchdown. And obviously, this is a very concentrated offense. And sportsbooks are giving a ton of credit to the Los Angeles Rams at this moment, where you actually do have the Rams projecting out to be a borderline top 5 offense in the league with an implied team total about 26.5 points. If you wanted to see where the actual projections are for Davante Adams or any of these players any given week, I would highly recommend checking them out on Underdog Fantasy. Currently, Underdog Fantasy is Puka Nacua listed higher lower 95.5 receiving yards for the Thursday night game. They have Davante Adams higher lower 55.5 receiving yards for that Thursday night game. And also, if you're not already on Underdog, they have the best new user offer that they've had since I've been working with them over the past 5 years. And that's after you play your first $5, you're going to get $100 added to your Underdog Fantasy account. On top of that, you'll be getting a free pick for the Thursday night game. If Brock Purdy plays, it's going to be higher, lower, half a total yard for Brock Purdy. If not, I'd imagine they'd switch it to Matthew Stafford. The link's going to be in the description, comment section, and also use code FLOCK and you'll get free questions to ask me in the live streams that we're doing every single night on this channel. Now let's move this over to the C tier wide receivers. These are guys that maybe you're not super excited to start, but you're probably jamming them in regardless. Ted McMillan's the wide receiver 36 in points per game, averaging about 11.5. But the market share numbers have been great. The issue is he hasn't scored a touchdown so far this year. But when you're averaging 8.5, 9 targets per contest, I think that is going to go in the right direction, even if you have garbage quarterback play. This matchup versus Miami is one that we're not too scared with. We just saw what Garrett Wilson did against them. Deebo Samuel's in a very interesting spot. I'm making these rankings as of Tuesday night under the assumption that you will not have Terry McLaurin, but you will have Jaden Daniels playing here in Washington. And if that were to be the case, Deebo Samuel's just going to be an absolute auto start. You're getting him involved in almost every way imaginable. Since the Austin Eckler injury, he's actually even had 3 carries each game out of this backfield. Now, Jacoby Myers will be our next option. I ranked Jacoby Myers way too high last week. The projections were very good on him, and honestly, I was a sheep to follow along. But this matchup here that we have against the Indianapolis Colts, I think you run it right back with Myers unless the knee brace comes off for Brock Bowers. And in that case, obviously the projections for the target volume for Jacoby will slide backwards. Xavier Worthy looks great. This matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars is one in which I think you can rank him as a borderline wide receiver 1 because you don't have Rashee Rice. Now, I know this isn't a super unique take. I know a lot of people have been saying this. Hell, in the Flock League, Corey has tried to trade me Xavier Worthy every single day. And I think the concern in the long run is once Rashee Rice comes back in, and on top of that, you have the Xavier Worthy injury concerns, he may not be as strong of a long-term option as he is right now. Jalen Waddle, obviously, big-time riser due to the Tyreek injury. So far this year, he's only averaged like 5.5, 6 targets per game. You haven't really seen any big volume numbers from him so far, but you still want to believe that he's a talented player. You still have the Dolphins against the Carolina Panthers projecting out very well with an implied team total of 23.5 points, telling us, well, you know what? Carolina has one of the worst defenses in the league. Going over and looking at A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's the wide receiver 51 in points per game. He has averaged 8.78 points. He's on Twitter, of all places, kicking and screaming, crying about the Eagles being 4-0, but him not being involved enough. And if there's one thing that I know is these NFL teams, they'll typically grease the squeaky wheel. So it's a tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. He's been horrible, but I'd expect him to be better going forward. The Big Q at 18, my number one guy. We pushed all the chips in with Quentin Johnston being wide receiver 79 on Underdog coming into the season. And we are printing cash right now because of it. The man is sitting here with the volume of 13 targets this past week. He's had 23 targets over the past 2 weeks. He's averaged almost 100 receiving yards per game. He's had 4 touchdowns through the first 4 weeks. He's averaged 19.88 fantasy points per game and is the wide receiver 4 in fantasy at the moment. Now, realistically, while I'll be a rich man if he is able to keep this up, I would say expectations probably are he slides back down to earth just a bit, and Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen take a little more of this offense, which I hope it doesn't happen, but that's what I'd expect. Chris Olave going up against the Giants here, finally scores a touchdown this past week. Still some of the worst efficiency that you're going to see in the entire NFL. Obviously, you can blame this on the offense. You can blame it on the quarterback play. Yards per target, 4.2, 5.4, 4.1, 3.3. But he is getting force-fed targets. He scored a touchdown this past week. You have a decent little floor with Olave. And this is a week where so many wide receivers are going to be missing. And we have so many buys. You just kind of have to play him. Michael Pittman Jr. also going to be somebody that you have to play. With Pittman sees a season-high 10 targets this past week, has 3 touchdowns through the first 4 weeks so far. Obviously, the expectation's going to be that that does get scaled back. But ultimately, I mean, he's sitting here averaging about 15.5 points per game, and he has cemented himself as the wide receiver 1 over Josh Downs in this offense. Now, moving over to Ladd McConkey, leading us off with our next tier. I'll reiterate, I think Ladd McConkey does give you a little bit of a bounce back here. While I really hope he continues to be this bad, I really hope he continues to average less than 10 points per game right now. He's the wide receiver 57 on the season. I think the expectation should be he's still in contention to be the wide receiver 1 for Los Angeles going into the future. I mean, we saw such a large sample at the end of last year where Ladd McConkey looked great. Now, Marvin Harrison Jr., boom bust option for the flex. Most weeks, I wouldn't be super excited to play Harrison if you could avoid it. But again, this is one of those weeks where you're probably not going to be able to avoid it, and you probably just have to jam him in. Now, moving over to Brian Thomas. Playing against the Kansas City Chiefs, expectations are that the Jags probably going to have to throw the ball a considerable amount. They probably will be trailing in this game. At the moment, you have an implied team total of 21.5 points, where the Jags are 3.5 point dogs against Kansas City. This is going to be in Jacksonville. Brian Thomas continues to see a decent amount of volume. Like Brian Thomas so far this season's averaging about 8 targets a game, but very similar to Chris Olave, the efficiency has just been horrendous, and he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. But this was the best week of his season so far. Keenan Allen's been a lot better than some of these players that we're going to rank ahead of him. And Keenan Allen's seen a lot of volume as well. So it is completely reasonable if you wanted to rank Keenan Allen at the very top of D tier. I'm just going to assume that the older veteran wide receiver maybe scales back as the season goes on, and these younger potential breakouts continue to scale up. Jawan Jennings, I literally have no idea how to rank him, right? We don't know the status of Purdy. We don't know. Everybody is injured in San Francisco, literally every single player. I mean, I got a call earlier today from Kyle Shanahan himself, who said, Mason, yes, I understand that you are busy leading the team of destiny, but we will do anything to get you out here to run routes for us at wide receiver this week. I told him, brother, I have bad news for you. The team of destiny comes first, and it always will. So San Francisco's getting desperate. I don't know how to rank the wide receivers. I'll keep the updated rankings on the site for everybody. just because we're going to have to monitor the injury reports. And also just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'll be live streaming every single day, giving you the last minute injury updates. And of course, with that, we are less than 8,000 subscribers away from hitting 300,000. So we are right there. Hit the like and subscribe. Jameson Williams has been very bad. Jameson Williams, wide receiver 47 on the year, despite the Detroit Lions outside of week 1 against the Packers being a great offense. Now, JMO is running more routes than ever, playing more snaps than ever. He had 8 targets this past week against the Cleveland Browns. They're paying him all the money, and this is a good matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. So if you're ever going to see a JMO breakout, it's probably going to be in this spot. Zay Flowers, obviously much lower in our rankings this week than he has been, but it comes with the Lamar Jackson injury. So Lamar goes down. Obviously, this is going to tank the overall offensive projections for Baltimore, where typically the Baltimore Ravens project to be one of the highest scoring teams in the league, where now this week they have an implied team total of 18.5 points, which actually marks them as one of the worst offenses in the league. Now, going over to our next guy in this tier, we are going to have Devonta Smith. Boom bust option where everything's just going to hinge on, can we actually get some passing volume here in Philly? Are they going to get forced to throw the ball playing against the Denver Broncos? Right now, the spread on this game is 3.5 points. So it should be a close contest. Obviously, if you're playing Smith, if you're playing A.J. Brown, you're hoping that Denver actually can get to a lead early and force Jalen Hurts to drop back. Now, let's go over to E tier. We're going to have Chris Godwin. And with Godwin, he was much lower than this in our rankings last week. And yes, after he scores 5.6 points in week 4, I'm now really excited to get him out there. The reason being is he had 10 targets. He ran just as many routes as Egbuka. So obviously, I'm not assuming that he's 100% just yet, but his utilization is pretty much there. And obviously, you have no Mike Evans, so they really don't have an option but to throw him out there a ton. Now, let's move over to Ricky Pearsall, and let's skip right by him. Let's not talk about this whatsoever, because realistically, I don't know what to say. We don't know if he's playing. We don't know if his quarterback's playing. I don't know who's playing. Wan'Dale Robinson will be our next name. With Wan'Dale, I would have never in a million years told you to start the dude if it was not for the Malik Neighbors injury. But now that Neighbors goes down, you're playing against the New Orleans Saints. The implied team total here is 19 points. So realistically, the implied team total for the Giants at the moment is only like 1.5, 2 points less than what you have with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, the Giants still project to score significantly more points than like the Cleveland Browns this week. So Wan'Dale is viable. Obviously, I'm not that excited about it. Another reason for it is like Jackson Dart proved to be a good quarterback, at least his first week in the league, but also Dart's going to run the ball a lot. And I don't know if there's going to be a ton of passing volume here. Now, do not ever share this with anybody. Okay, this is going to be a secret between you and me, but I'm going to have to put T against my starting lineup this week. Yes, I maybe have the worst wide receiver core of any 4-0 team in fantasy football. T. Higgins not only going to be my starting lineup, he's my wide receiver 1 with DK Metcalf on bye. That's how bad it is. What I can say is, while the Cincinnati Bengals offenses look like one of the worst in the league, sportsbooks are forward-looking. They generally know more than we do. The Bengals offense projects to score about as many points as Minnesota. They project to score more than Baltimore this week. They project to just score like 2 points less than Jacksonville, a point less than freaking Tampa. They project to be a better offense than Tennessee. So obviously, I'm not trying to sit here and tell you to get excited about playing T. Higgins, but at least I'm trying to get myself there. I think the Cincinnati Bengals offense will be much better this week than they've been over the past 2. Now, Jerry Jeudy is probably going to be in a garbage offense. Jerry Jeudy had 9 targets this past week. I mean, if you want to make fun of Olave for the yards per target, Jerry Judy's just as bad. And now you have Dylan Gabriel under center, which is just mind-boggling to me. Like, the fact that we are actually doing this. And honestly, because we are doing that, I probably need to move Jerry Jeudy behind Jordan Addison. Addison, his first game in here, he has 15.5 fantasy points. I mean, if the man knew how to, run as fast as he can drive a car, he would have had that long touchdown. It would have been a lot better than that as well. And again, I think you kind of want to be in on Minnesota, considering the fact that this offense has been in Europe an extra week than what Cleveland has. Now, going over and looking at Khalil Shakir, boom bust option, wide receiver 33 so far in points per game. Playing against the New England Patriots, the Buffalo Bills project to be the highest scoring offense in the league this week, and it's not even remotely close. But again, Shakir has had a total of 11 targets over the past 3 weeks. So the target volume's not exactly there. And then Stephon Diggs will be our last guy. With Diggs, you finally got the snaps. You finally got the routes this past week, and the fantasy points followed. Had over 100 receiving yards and had 16.1 fantasy points. It's going to be something that I really need to figure out myself because, again, I have 3 tier E wide receivers. I'm going to have to start 2 of them. I'm going to have some running backs in my flexes. But yeah, these wide receivers, I don't want anything to do with them. Now, Alec Manor looks to be the wide receiver 1 in Tennessee, especially with the Calvin Ridley injury. But frankly, I don't know exactly how excited we can be about it, considering that the Tennessee Titans offense looks like they're even worse than the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's not like Alec Manor is as talented as Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. Now, Keon Coleman, boom bust option, wide receiver 39 this year in points per game. Here's the thing. I feel gross about having to start players in E tier. If you're having to start players in F tier, you better be in a 14-team league. You better, I don't know what's going on. We'll have Keon here, boom bust option. Darius Slayton, boom bust option. I mean, with Slayton, he's had 5.5 fantasy points per game. I know some people want to look at the splits with and without freaking Malik Neighbors, like a 2-game sample. Like, it's not like Darius Slayton's going to be that exciting. It's not that great of a player. It's not a good offense. Josh Downs in a better offense. I think Josh Downs a hell of a lot better as a player, but Josh Downs also averaged 6.5 fantasy points so far this season. It's not like Travis Hunter's done much better. Travis Hunter's at 6.2. It's not like Cooper Kupp's done much better. Cooper Kupp's at 7.8. And then with Trey Tucker is still the wide receiver 12 in points per game, funny enough, just because that one blow-up week where he had 41 fantasy points, he just looked incredible, but it's the Trey Tucker experience. We talked about this in the week 3 waiver wire video saying, don't get that excited. It's like, look at the little sandwich that you have weeks 2, 3, 4. You have 4 points in week 2, a 40 bomb in week 3, and then 4 points in week 4. We'll call it the 4 sandwich. It's incredible. Going over and looking at what we have with G tier, Hollywood Brown, I know scores a touchdown this past week, but you really needed Mahomes to go nuclear, and I don't think you get that again. And with Xavier Worthy in, Xavier Worthy's clearly taking the majority of the work. Shaheed could be a desperation start. He's had 4 receptions, 3 straight weeks here, but obviously ceiling's not exactly there with how bad the offense is. Calvin Ridley's injured, and Calvin Ridley's looked like the worst NFL wide receiver in the league's worst offense. Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, boom bust options, Christian Kirk, Tyquan Thornton. Like, this is by far and away the grossest week at wide receiver. Really, I think everybody C tier and above are players that you should be excited to start. D tier, shaky flex plays. E tier, you can get them in if you're desperate like I am. F and G tier, if they're in your lineup, salute soldier. You're going to have one hell of a battle this weekend. But I really appreciate you and really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. And I want to remind y'all, if you want to take advantage of the #1 underdog offer that I've seen since I've been with them over the past 5 years, the link's in the description and comment section. Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every single state. And after you play your first $5, you are going to get $100 added to your account. And on top of that, you are going to be getting free questions that you can ask me in the live streams, which we are doing every single day until Christmas. But I really appreciate you, and I really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.